You know that sentence you've most likely said a million times before? The one that goes, "This is the worst day of my life." Well, here's the weird part. A lot of us say it and then we keep living. So what's actually happening on your worst day and why does it feel permanent when it isn't? Today I'm going to show you the exact 5 shifts that help you get through the day that feels like it broke you. And I'm saving the most important one for later because it's the one nobody does until it's too late. Now, I'm not talking about a day where you spilled your coffee and missed the bus. I mean the real stuff. The call that changes your life, the breakup you didn't see coming, the sudden job loss, or maybe even the argument that goes too far. When you're in that situation, your brain does this wild thing where it whispers, "Yep, this is it now, this is your life." But the truth is, your worst day isn't proof your life is over. It's usually proof that your brain is zoomed in so far that you can't see the rest of the story. It focuses on this idea that because it hurts now, it will hurt like this forever. It takes a temporary moment and turns it into a permanent identity. It doesn't say this is a hard day, it says this is a hard life. And that's why people don't just feel sad on their worst day, they feel trapped. Because pain plus time distortion is a nasty combo, since your brain starts predicting the future like it's a fact. If you've ever looked back on a past worst day, you already know something important. You didn't feel that way forever, you didn't stay that version of you forever, you kept going. And at some point, you laughed again, you ate again, you slept again, and finally you found a random Tuesday where you suddenly thought, wait, I'm okay right now. So let's talk about how you actually get from the worst day to that Tuesday. I'm going to give you 5 shifts that help you survive your worst day without pretending it doesn't hurt. And as we go, I want you to keep one phrase in your head. I don't need to win today, I just need to continue. So the first of the 5 shifts is simply name the day, don't name your life. On your worst day, you'll catch yourself using permanent language like "I'm done" or "I always mess everything up." But permanent language is emotional quicksand. So instead, do something simple that sounds almost too basic. Just change the sentence. It's not "my life is falling apart," but rather "today is brutal." Or even it's not "I can't do this," but rather "I can't do this the way I wanted to." When you name your life, you trap yourself in a story, but when you name the day, you leave the door open for tomorrow. So if you've ever said "I'm just not that person," you might actually mean "I'm not that person yet," and "yet" is a small word that keeps people alive. Which brings me on to my next shift, shrink time. Your worst day becomes unbearable when you try to survive the whole future in one sitting. So stop. On the worst day, the goal is not fix my life. The goal is what do I do in the next 10 minutes? Not the next year, not the next month, not even the next week, the next 10 minutes. And if 10 minutes is too much, make it 2 minutes. And whilst you take those couple of minutes, you can do something as simple as drinking some water, maybe even taking a quick shower, hell, even just stepping outside and feeling cold air on your face. Because on your worst day, you don't need motivation, you need traction. And these tiny actions prove to you that you still have control over something. Since sometimes the most courageous thing you can do all day is brush your teeth, and that counts. The third shift is borrow hope from evidence. Because on your worst day, you won't feel hopeful, so don't demand a feeling, demand proof. Ask yourself this: have I ever survived something I thought I wouldn't? And if the answer is yes, even once, then you have evidence that your current thought is not a prophecy, it's a mood. And this is where people mess it up. They try to think their way out of pain with quotes and positive affirmations, but that's just not the move. The move is more grounded than that. It's thinking, I've been in a dark place before, and somehow I'm still here. Because that sentence doesn't require you to be okay, it just requires you to be honest. So now after all that, we have 3 shifts, but the next one is the one that changes what your worst day even means. Because most people try to power through a worst day, and that's exactly why it keeps repeating. So the 4th shift is to swap the question. On your worst day, your brain asks, why is this happening to me? And sometimes that's a fair question, but it's usually a question with no clean answer. And when there's no clean answer, it turns into a mental courtroom where you keep replaying the same evidence. So you swap it. You go from why me to what now. Not necessarily what now for the rest of my life, just what right now. Because the question what now can look like asking what's the right next step? What's the one thing I can do that makes tomorrow 1% easier? Or even what's the truth I've been dodging? Because what now is a forward question. It gives you handles, and this is crucial. Sometimes your worst day is the day you finally stop negotiating with reality, you stop saying this shouldn't be happening, and you start saying, okay, it is happening, so what now? That's not giving up, that's taking your power back. Which leads me on to the 5th and final shift, and this is the one people underestimate. Who you're around on your worst day matters more than what you tell yourself. Because on your worst day, you are suggestible, you absorb energy, you borrow beliefs, and if you spend that day around people who minimize you, you don't just feel worse, you start believing you don't deserve help. But if you spend that day around the right person, even just one, someone who can sit with you without fixing you, your nervous system calms down enough to breathe again. So I want you to build what I call your worst day team. Not your party friends, not your good vibes only crew. I mean the people you can message with a sentence like, I'm not okay, I don't need advice, I just need you. And if you don't have that person right now, that doesn't mean you're doomed. It means that building it becomes part of your next chapter. Because here's the thing, your worst day is heavy, but you were never meant to carry it alone. So when people say that was the worst day of my life, it's because the worst day doesn't just hurt, it shrinks your world. It zooms your brain in so hard that it feels like the pain is the whole universe. But the real win, it's when you start zooming back out, because the goal isn't to pretend it didn't happen. The goal is to stop letting it define everything that happens after it. And that's why those 5 shifts matter. When you name the day instead of naming your life, you're basically telling your brain, not everything is broken, something is hurting. And when you shrink time and focus on the next 10 minutes, you stop trying to survive an entire future that hasn't even arrived yet. Then, when you borrow hope from evidence, you remember you've been knocked down before, but you didn't stay down forever, not because you're superhuman, but because you kept showing up. Follow this with switching from why me to what now, and then you stop arguing with reality and start building tiny points of control you can actually grab. Then, with all this in mind, it's rounded off when you choose a worst day team, because it allows you to stop treating pain like it's a solo mission, because it isn't. It never was. And listen, sometimes your worst day isn't the day you lose something. Sometimes it's the day you lose the version of life you thought you were guaranteed. And that's why it feels like grief, even if nobody died. Because something did die. A plan, a dream, a relationship, a version of you. And if you're sitting there thinking, why am I taking this so hard? That's why. But here's what nobody tells you when you're in it. The fact that you're still here, the fact that you're still watching, still trying to make sense of it, still looking for a way through, that is not a weakness. That's the beginning of the comeback. Not the movie comeback where everything's fixed in a montage, but the real one. The one where you wake up and it still hurts, but you drink water anyway. You go for a 5-minute walk anyway. And then one day, you notice you laughed at something, or you felt normal for a second, maybe even had a good hour. And it doesn't sound impressive, but it's huge. Because that's the moment you realize your worst day wasn't a prophecy, it was a chapter. Yes, it was a brutal one, but it was not the final one. So if it's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this. If today is your worst day, you don't have to fix your life today. You don't have to feel hopeful today. You don't have to win today. You just have to continue. Take it 10 minutes at a time. And then without even realizing, you'll wake up and that day won't even feel like your whole life anymore. It'll just feel like a chapter you survived. You'll look back and realize your worst day didn't break you. It introduced you to a version of you that can survive anything. Not because you were fearless, but because you kept going anyway. And that's the whole point. Your worst day doesn't get the final word, you do.